For Geeta this morning, we start with Geeta Dhyanam. There's an English translation of Geeta Dhyanam in the Kirtan book somewhere. It's a sheet. So if we can find that, we can chant. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters of the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us. O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, upon thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna. Arjuna is the calf. People of purified intellect are the drinkers. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent and the crippled cross mountains. Hari Om Tat Sat. I don't know what you're trying to tell me, Mataji.
Not focused on that.
Oh, okay, thank you. We do that now. Okay, Mataji. Okay. So in chapter 4, which is really where these concepts come together, as we follow the play and the teaching. First chapter is the yoga of Arjuna's grief, which is where, to use Kartikeya's term, Arjuna freaks out. And he freaks out because he takes himself to be the body. And he finds himself in a very challenging, very difficult situation, and grief, fear arises, and it's very strong, and he loses himself to it. So, even though he's in a situation that he was prepared for, and he knew what he was to do, we don't say he's a bad character, we say, that's my disease. Because he knew he'd been prepared for it, but he was overwhelmed by a tide that rose within his own person, within himself. He was completely overwhelmed by that tide that rose. And he lost himself. So, second chapter, second discourse is the Yoga of Wisdom, Samkhya Yoga, which is where the Lord says to us, what are you doing? You've forgotten everything. You've forgotten that you were prepared for this. You've forgotten why you're doing it. You've forgotten, by the way, who you are, most importantly, and then reminds, there's never been a time when I have not been, nor you, nor any of these, nor will there ever be a time when any of these cease to be. So, meaning, thou art eternal. Thou art eternal. So, that's Samkhya Yoga, that's the wisdom. And the discourse goes on, of course. And then the question becomes how to be free of this rising tide. How to be settled in this understanding. First, how to know and how to stay in it, that I am not this body. And so karma yoga is prescribed, which is the yoga of selfless service. And at the beginning of chapter 3, Arjuna asks the question. He says, I don't get it, because you're telling me that I have to act and I have to do this terrible thing that I don't want to do. I would rather just run away. And you're telling me that, but you're telling me that what's important is wisdom, knowing who I am. And he says, so which is the way then? I am thy disciple, so please instruct me. And the Lord says, well, wisdom, but the way to wisdom is through selfless service. So now we're dealing with the concept of renunciation. And the first thing, and of course Arjuna had this, and every single one of us experienced this. It's part of the dis-ease. Dis-ease. When we say disease, it doesn't sound like what it really is. But it's a state of dis-ease, not at ease. Because we're dealing with factors that can't be reconciled. It's not possible to reconcile duality and unity. It's not possible to reconcile the two apparent selves. You can't get them together and find an accommodation. You have to choose one. You have to pick. People say, can't I find balance in spiritual life? And yes, as soon as you choose the right door, then you'll find balance. As soon as we recognize the essential unity, as soon as we come to recognize the essential unity, then you will be at balance. You will be in balance. Right? This is it. So here, in this chapter, it's getting put together. How does karma yoga, wisdom, and this renunciation, which I'm hearing from you, because I want to renounce, I want to put my weapons down. I've done it several times, and you keep telling me, no, pick them up. I'm trying to renounce. That renunciation of action is what's called Samnyasa. But the Lord is teaching Tyaga, which is renunciation of the fruits of the action. So, and that's the discussion that we're in now, which he says is the real renunciation. It's not renouncing action. It's not doing what you're supposed to do. He actually says we're supposed to do what we are supposed to do. How to say? Anything from the discussion in chapter? So we're in chapter 4, which is this yoga of wisdom, renunciation, and action. Anything from anyone that, in terms of the principles that we're dealing with, that really hits home?
Yes.
What?
When I read Swami Pramananda's, it made more sense today.
You want to read it?
Yes.
Because there are those who
I
can't.
will, but my will is never done. God's will.
God never wills.
God never wills, but God's will is ever done.
Is ever done. Mm.
Yes, and it's almost like getting out of my own way and letting life just unfold. But to be able to do that without putting all this old impact of what I needed to do, the desires I had, and just let it be and observe it, to step back.
Okay.
And to let it happen and to be willing and able to fulfill what is in front of me.
So in saying the words to let it happen, sounds like we'll just sit back and let it all happen around us.
No, let
then,
God's will happen and be part of it.
Be part of it.
Yes.
Through us, as it were.
Not control it.
Through us.
Yes.
As it were, yeah. And so we've come to the concept of the two apparent selves, which is and over the last couple of days we've been exploring this, haven't we? So the observer, the witness, and then the doer. So the inner and the outer. And the inner is of the nature, the deepest inner, not talking about the thoughts, is of the nature of what? The I is of the nature of? It's of the nature of?
Observer.
Sorry?
Observer.
It's of the nature of?
Awareness.
It's of the nature of? What are you looking for?
The goodness.
What do you want?
Happiness.
Thank you. Peace. Thank you. You got there. Of the nature of peace.
Yes.
Of the nature of peace. So Lord had said this in the lead up to this famous shloka about inaction. I am unaffected by all actions, nor do I desire any results. Whoever experiences this quality in me is also set free. Now, where would you experience this quality in Krishna? You would experience it in your... You would experience it in your own...
Experience.
Your own self. Not higher self. Forget higher self, lower self for a second.
No.
If you experience what Lord Krishna is talking about, you experience it
In
Real time.
in your own self.
Yes.
In your own self. And is set free. And is set free. Okay. So yesterday we read this. The person is wise who sees the inaction in actions and the action in inaction. He or she is a yogi and can accomplish everything. Where is the inaction in action?
The inaction is in the I as the observer, stepping back from the karma, what you're physically doing, and not forming a judgment, opinion.
Now, very good. It's simple. You said it.
Okay.
You said it. You said it. Everything else is superfluous. You said the inaction is in the I. Okay. The self, capital S, self. The observer, witness. So, what's at the center of all actions? What is at the center of all actions?
The I.
The I. And what is this action in inaction?
Like if you sit on your butt and say, I'm not going to do anything.
No, just a second.
Not performing the duty?
Yeah. What does it mean, this second way? How do you hear it? This second way of saying inaction. Action in inaction. Somebody who's just sitting, right? Not doing. Yeah. We had the question yesterday. Again, it's such a confusing concept that's being shared when we process it or deal with it in our normal way.
Yeah.
It's so confusing. How can there be inaction in action? It's action, for God's sakes, right?
Stepping back from the experience and letting it just occur without judgment.
It's an inner versus outer.
Yes. Inner observer.
Okay. And it's always there. Okay. And then action in inaction. Again, a very odd concept. How can there be action in inaction? Mataji, how can there be action in inaction? How can that happen?
Inaction is a peace you have.
Is the...
Peace.
Well, that's the first use of the term.
The karma.
Action is when you are doing it, we are not expecting the fruits from it.
That's correct. But here's the second use.
We said yesterday that choosing not to act is
Choosing not to act. So here you can deal with the term action as that bearing karma or karmic activity. So who's acting and who's not acting?
The body and the I is not.
The body is acting, the gunas are acting, and the I is observing. Okay.
Will not forgiving be an action?
Of course. Choosing not to do something is action, in inaction. I'll give you an example, if this helps relate. This is pilgrimage stuff, and I've shared this before. If you take a walk, you're going to invariably see a piece of trash or a tin can or something like that. So there are two urges that come within, because they're two apparent selves. So there's an urge to pick it up, yes? Yeah. And then there are thoughts about why I shouldn't be bothered. And then there's a choice that's made. Right? Yes?
Yes, the intellect.
How often? If you just walk on, did you make a choice?
Yes.
Okay. So if you choose not to act, you chose not to act. Is that action?
Right.
Yes.
Action.
Action in action. So who's acting here? We just answered it. So if the who's acting here chooses not to act, that's still action. It's still karmic. Okay. So if you see someone sitting and you recognize that they're avoiding their duty, you're going to see action there. If you recognize that they're supposed to be up and with their kids right now, and instead they're avoiding that, they're just sitting, you're going to see the karma. If you see, you'll see it. And at the same time, this action, one doing one's duty, you'll see the inaction at the center of it. Okay, enough of that. We'll continue on. Enough of that. We've probably beaten the concept. But we continue from that concept. He says, whatever you do without personal desire for the results is called wise by the sages. Your actions are pure and you know the truth. So this whole time, Arjuna has been telling us to act, to do, and that doing what is prescribed, not what is proscribed, doing what is proper, engaging in our duty, allows us to experience what?
Peace.
Peace. Very good. Which is the nature of our own self. The way to unlock it, he says, is to act properly. So whatever you, and here we come back to the same concept. How do you act properly? How do you act in a way that unlocks the peace within you?
Not doing beneficial things, not being self-centered, and not requiring fruits.
So do what is proper in the circumstance.
Right.
Yes. Without expecting any fruit from it.
Totally.
So do what is to be done, but not for yourself. And that he's on this. He's been on it for quite some time now. That, he says, unlocks the peace inside. So whatever you do without personal desire for the results is called wise by the sages. So this is Tyaga that he's teaching. This is this renunciation of the fruit. Renunciation of the fruit. And he goes on to say, then your actions are pure and you know the truth. Who knows the truth? Self. We've been dealing with that concept also, right?
Yes.
That the wisdom in humanity, the wisdom in the human, is veiled, covered, as it were, smoke and fire.
Oh, yes.
Right? Shade, this was Upanishad, shade and sun. So it's here, it's not someplace else. The wisdom is not someplace else. Where is your intuition?
It's in the eye.
Is it in someone else?
No.
And that intuition is wisdom, isn't it?
Yeah.
So again, so practically, he's teaching us how to unlock that wisdom in a way that is never hidden again. We have a relationship with our intuition which seems to be that it only exists now and then. Right? This is the relationship we have with intuition. And we can see, okay, it seems to exist when I sleep. Or when I meditate, when I'm successful in meditation. Sometimes it exists then. Right? But the truth of the matter is the intuition is your own self. It always exists. It's eternal. It's resplendent. It's always here. It's never not here. It and peace are in exactly the same place. So from a very practical standpoint, forget about God and all of this. You can say, I just want to be at peace and undisturbed. I want to know what to do all of the time. I never want to suffer from not knowing what to do, right? Then the prescription is the same. Because that wisdom exists within us. And we're being taught how to unlock it. And how to unlock it so that it's permanently unlocked. So that it's always here with us. So that we don't have to suffer from indecisiveness, from indecision, from not knowing what to do or where to go or who to be with or any of this. This is torture, isn't it?
Yes. And doubt dissolves.
This constant doubt about what should I do in this situation? Should I vaccinate? Should I not vaccinate? My employer, I mean, this is so practical, isn't it? My employer says I have to vaccinate. If I don't, they say they'll fire me. I mean, people are dealing with this kind of stuff in this age.
Yeah.
What should I do? Well, the answer is inside.
Yes.
But I'm not hearing the answer. It's because you're all wrapped up in yourself. You're all caught up in yourself. So he says how to get out of ourselves. Little self stuff, little self stuff. You're not the body. You pick. You're not the body. Death will come. Death is only affecting the body. It doesn't affect the soul, for God's sakes. And it comes when it's time. So, for gosh sakes, don't do something because you might die if you do it or you don't do it. These are all veils we're dealing with. These are all veils. We need to get to our own wisdom, which will lead us through the entirety of our life if we can unlock it. There won't be a doubt. There won't be a question because that guidance is with us. Of course it is. Otherwise, if there is a God, then God must be cruel if God doesn't tell us what to do. Right? God must be torturing us, must want to torture us if we don't have the wisdom available to us of how to engage in this life. So the wisdom right here, this is how practical it is. The guidance right here, right now. There's no need to be alone. There's no need to struggle and strain and carry the weight of the world on your shoulders and all this stuff. There's no need for any of that. It's a matter of following the prescription that we're being given, and we can be free of all of that. It's right here, right where we are. Right here. So this is the importance of the teaching that's being shared with us, It unlocks the real life. The only difference between the saints and the sages and us is that they live the real life. They don't struggle and strain. And it's not that they're not doing. My God, they're always doing. We talked about Gandhiji last night in satsang, and the example of Gandhiji is Gandhiji would do everything, clean the trees. He does everything, right? But completely undisturbed. We've associated that disturbance with the doing, but that's not true. Lord Krishna says it's the opposite of that. Do what is right, and that unlocks the wisdom, and it unlocks the place of peace. But what is right means what is in accordance with the life that I've given you. I've given you a life of sacrifice. I've given you the opportunity to be me. I've given you the opportunity to find me in you. Right? So sacrifice meaning to make sacred, to make holy. So I've given you the ability to find me in you. And here's the way. Here's the way. And this is from the original rule book. So he says, whatever you do without personal desire for the results is called wise by the sages. Why? Because that unlocks the wisdom. That unlocks the peace. And your actions are pure then, so they're not accruing karmas anymore. They're not out of alignment. The actions then don't bind you in any way, shape, or form. And you're free to whatever is guided by your own intuitive guidance. is going to be perfectly correct, regardless of what people say.
It's true.
So whatever the sages do, even people will argue,
Well,
but they're undisturbed by that. And it's not because they're ignorant or trying to ignore people and the input that they have, etc. They don't run by committee.
no.
My God, running by committee. Oh. A little commentary. A wise person is the one who seems to be doing things without any desire to do them and without any desire for the result. He or she seems to be doing things, but the actions of the wise person are all completely fired by the absolute truth, by real knowing. After you gently roast seeds, they might appear to be like they were before, ready to germinate. They keep their shape, their name, and appearance, but they don't germinate. They've lost the germ of their desire. Because there's no desire, the seed doesn't grow. From all appearances, you might appear to be acting and doing everything. People naturally might think, see, you're doing the same things we do. Sometimes you seem to be quite eager to get things done. If it doesn't happen, you seem to be scolding us. But remember in earlier sloka 325, an enlightened person does things with the same zeal as an unenlightened person, Arjuna, but without attachment, and thus guides others on the path of selfless action. Moreover, the enlightened people don't act because they personally want to do these things. Nature's force functions through them in a special way. They are catalysts. Some chemicals are used by catalytic agents. They don't have any special purpose for themselves. They're used for getting something done. Once that is achieved, they go away. That's a catalytic agent. During welding, the rod is coated with flux as a catalytic agent. Its purpose is just to make the metal flow freely. The flux is not there for the sake of the flux, but just to fulfill a purpose and then go away. Sometimes you see people in that role, and that is what's meant here. We'll ask, when we come to spiritual path, we'll ask about practices, and this is the way we'll approach it in the beginning, right? What should I practice? Because the mind is so objectified. Actually, Mataji would correct and say the mind is so subjective. Meaning the subject is identified with the objects. The subject is identified with the objects, and therefore looking at what object or what practice to have in order to have the happiness that we're seeking, because I've tried so many other ones. It must be one of these, I just haven't been looking at the right one. And of course the answer will be, actually it's not the practice, it's the bhava.
The readiness.
It's the bhava.
What's the bhava?
The feeling. The feeling, the inner state related to the practice, right? If I practice whatever I practice for me, it will be of no use. There might be some benefit and there for a while. So if for me, we talk about this, if for me I learn how to breathe properly, then there will be benefit for a while. But then I'll hit a wall again. And the reason I keep hitting the wall is because I'm doing it for me.
That's right.
But if I can let go of that and do it for the Lord or do it for the all without being attached to the fruit, then I'm unlocking is what's happening. I'm unlocking, I'm opening a door to myself, to the highest self. That's what's happening. I'm unveiling, I'm unwrapping at that point because there's no little self. Here's the secret. There is no little self. You can look everywhere, you'll never find it because it doesn't exist. There's no separate self. That's the secret. Right? But it doesn't have to be a secret to you.
It is.
You can give it up. You can give up the idea that you're separate and alone and incomplete. You can be done with it. We follow the formula. So, which is not so much the practices. The practices are what the practices are. Practices here are perfect. Practices at some other ashram, some completely different practices. They're perfect. No need to argue on which one's right. Is it Kriya Yoga or is it Raja Yoga? Which one are you?
All the paths.
Is it chanting this mantra or that mantra? Which one is it?
Secret's ready.
And that's the secret. It's this attitude, this approach that Lord Krishna is talking with us about, and doing what is prescribed. As it comes to ashrams, for example, what's prescribed? Well, you join in the practices that the ashramites are doing. That's prescribed. You do your own. That's proscribed. Oh. Okay, we'll close for the morning. Let me read a couple more because they're here. 20 and 21. Because you've let go of attachment to the fruits of your actions, you are ever content and have no dependencies. Does that resonate now?
Oh.
So you're actually, you could say, independent at that point. Not separate, but independent. Independent of the identification with the little self.
Yeah.
Though you appear to be doing things, karma, actually you're not the doer. So there's a recognition of that at that point, right? Who's doing? Well, nature's doing.
Yeah.
That's this beautiful quote from Nisargadatta. Somebody's with him, he's giving Nisargadatta, trying to give him a hard time because he's smoking cigarettes. And he says, don't you see, you're here lecturing me about life and you're smoking cigarettes, and that's stupid. Don't you see that? And he says, you know how you see me smoking cigarettes? Yes? It says, me too. I see me smoking cigarettes. He said, I could change it if it were really important, but it's just not that important. Because you don't want anything for yourself and because you have control of your mind and ego. This is Krishna. This is Sloka 21. So it's authoritative. Because you don't want anything for yourself and because you have control of your mind and ego. Now you've asserted. Now you've said, no, we're going to go this way. We're going to follow the prescription. We're going to go this way. You have to assert to do it. And because you do not consider possessions as your own. It's a big one, but it's true, isn't it? As we sit here in satsang, we see, what do you own? What do you own, Gopal? But that's also so tough, right? You are completely pure despite the actions of your body and mind, which move according to the forces of nature. So that's freedom. That's a taste of freedom. Okay. I'll close with final prayers now. Page 174. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivardanam Orvai Rukameva Vandana Mritor Mukshiyamam Mritata Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivardanam Orvai Rukameva Vandana Mritor Mukshiyamam Mritata Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushtivardanam Orvai Rukameva Vandana Mritor Mukshiyamam Mritata Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Shantu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyanto Makashit Bhave Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mritor Ma Mritam Gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudashyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, salutations and prostrations unto thee. Thou art omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. Thou art Satchidananda. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. Thou art the indweller of all beings. Grant us an understanding heart, equal vision, balanced mind, faith, devotion, and wisdom. Grant us inner spiritual strength to resist temptation and to control the mind. Free us from egoism, lust, anger, greed, hatred, and jealousy. Fill our hearts with divine virtues. Let us behold thee in all these names and forms. Let us serve thee in all these names and forms. Let us ever remember thee. Let us ever sing thy glories. Let thy name be ever on our lips. Let us abide in thee forever and ever. Humble Sakguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. And for all the saints and sages of all the traditions. Let's stand for our tea.